By this point in Luke's gospel, Jesus is absolutely committed to go to Jerusalem. He's going there knowing he's going to die, but he's got a heart of compassion all the way. You come into Luke chapter 14. There's this guy that shows up. Jesus is having dinner with one of the Pharisees. The Pharisees, very respected in this time, but they, on the whole, really hated Jesus because Jesus would call them out for hypocrisy all the time. And so they didn't like him. Well, here's this guy who's sick. He's got dropsy, kind of like retaining water, a sign of a serious disease. This guy shows up, and the Pharisees see it, and they see an opportunity. But not for this guy to get better. They see an opportunity for Jesus to maybe heal this guy on the Sabbath day, because it was Sabbath, and then they could have the opportunity to accuse Jesus of breaking the Sabbath law. See, they care nothing about this guy, but Jesus does. So he takes this guy, knowing the Pharisees think these kinds of things, and he heals the guy anyway. Knowing that they have a big problem with this is in Luke chapter 14, Jesus asked a question to them, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not? They won't answer him. And then he talks about, well, which of you, having a son or an ox that's fallen into a well on the Sabbath, they wouldn't immediately pull him out? And they won't answer, because this is the way they are with Jesus. So then Jesus just takes the opportunity to start telling them some stories. Jesus tells a story to the host of the dinner. Luke 14:13. It says, when you give a feast, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind. He follows this up with a story about a banquet. The host had invited a lot of people, but many of them had excuses for why they couldn't come. Some had work to do, some had just gotten married. Whatever the reason, they couldn't come. So Jesus goes on, he says, Luke 14:21, says, so the servant in the story came and reported these things to the master. And the master of the house became angry and said to his servant, go out quickly to the streets and the lanes of the city and bring in the poor and the crippled and the blind and the lame. And the servant said, sir, what you commanded has been done, and still there's room at the banquet. And the master said to the servant, well, then go out to the highways and the hedges and compel the people to come in, that my house may be filled. And there's something bigger here happening than Jesus giving some instructions about principles for having dinner. In fact, I want you to look later at how at the next stories Jesus tells. But in the middle of these stories, Luke 14, verse 25 and following, you see Jesus comes right back to the idea of what it's going to take to be his follower. Luke 14, 25 to 33, Jesus starts saying radical things like you need to reject even your allegiance to your family if it competes with allegiance to him. You need to get your cross and get behind him. You better count the cost because it's going to cost and get behind me or you cannot be my disciple. Then Jesus goes back to stories in the Gospel of Luke chapter 15. There are many tax collectors and sinners gathering to Jesus. The tax collectors are some of the most despicable people to the rest of the Jewish people because they are working for Rome. They are traitors, having sold out to the Roman government. And the sinners, who are big sinners, the people that, maybe like the prostitutes and various other kinds of big sinners in the Jewish mind at this time, those people and the tax collectors, who are the most hated people, those are the kind of people that want to be around Jesus. And the Pharisees and the scribes grumble about this. They say, this man receives sinners and eats with them. See, there's all stuff about eating and banqueting. And they're saying, look, this guy, he eats with people like this. Question, is that true? It is. It is true. That is Jesus. And so then Jesus responds by telling them three of the greatest stories in the Bible. He says, a man had 100 sheep, and he lost one of them. So he leaves the 99 to go and search for the one sheep that was lost. And when he finds it, he's filled with joy. He says, that's what it's like when a sinner repents. There's more joy in heaven over that than over 99 that don't need repentance. This is a lot like the sounds of Ezekiel 34, about how God's saying he would come to seek and to save the sheep that were lost. Then he tells another story. A woman has 10 silver coins, and these are really important to her. she loses one. So she searches incessantly to find that one. And when she does, she's filled with joy. She says, that's the way it is in heaven. There's more joy in heaven over that kind of thing. When something that is lost is found, than over things that are not lost, people that are not lost. Seems to be the kind of thing he's saying. Then he tells the third story. It says, a man had 2 sons. One wanders into sin. The father longs for that son to come home again. One day, after his son has wasted everything, the son finally comes to his senses and he turns to come back home. He's thinking about all the things he's got to say to his dad. But when his father sees him a long way off, he runs toward his son. He embraces his son. His son can't even get out all the words of apology that he can get out, because the father is overwhelmed with joy because his son who was lost has finally come home. And in the stories, Jesus is making the same point. Like Luke 15:7, just so I tell you, there'll be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance. 15:10, just so I tell you, there's joy before the angels of God over one sinner who repents. What's the point? The heart of the Father is to reach out to the lost, to those who have nothing, to those who have wasted their lives, and to bring them back. And when they come back, all of heaven celebrates. Why does Jesus eat with sinners? He does it because he has the same heart as the Father. He wants to sit at the table with the needy, with the sinful. He loves to bring the kind of people to the table who have absolutely no business being there with him. It reminds us maybe of David and Mephibosheth back in 2 Samuel chapter 9. But when you look at the end of the story about the 2 sons, you realize it's not just a story about the lost son. It's a story about 2 sons. Because the elder brother, who never left, hears about the celebration over his brother who came home, and he's angry. He's bitter. I've never gotten anything like this. This guy, he goes and he wastes his life in sin, and I have never done that to you, Father. How? You've never celebrated me. And Jesus is telling this, remember, to Pharisees, scribes who are upset with him because he eats with tax collectors and sinners. This is just like what the religious leaders are doing in the text right before this. But what is so amazing in the text, if you read it, Luke 15:28, is that the Father goes out to that son too. The Father doesn't want any of his sons to stay on the outside. He goes out and he beckons this son to come in too, to celebrate. But by the end of the story, there's no indication if that son came in or would ever come in and join the feast. Jesus is very different from any religious leader of his people, of his day. But he is very much like his Father. He has got the heart of the Father to seek and to save the lost.